In every corner of America there are libraries filled with knowledge, silence, and something else. Some say books whisper when no one's around. Some say the walls remember every secret ever told between their shelves. But what if those whispers weren't just your imagination? Tonight we open the doors to 3 libraries where silence has a voice, where shadows turn pages on their own, and where some librarians never went home. From the cursed corners of Salem to the haunted aisles of Chicago, to the dark archives of New Orleans, these are the stories that were never meant to be read after midnight. So dim the lights, silence your phone, and whatever you do, don't turn the last page. The Whispering Stacks of Salem Public Library. If you've ever stepped inside the Salem Public Library after sunset, you might have felt it. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel empty but alive. Locals say the place has a heartbeat of its own, especially when the lights dim and the air grows heavy with that old paper scent. The library, built in 1893, stands in the historic district of Salem, Massachusetts, a town already drenched in eerie legends and tragic tales from the witch trials. But what most visitors don't know is that behind those tall mahogany shelves, under the ticking of the century-old clock, something sinister whispers. The story begins with a librarian named Margaret Hayes who took her job there in 1912. She was known for her devotion to the place, never missed a day, even during snowstorms. People admired her calm presence and her obsession with keeping every book in perfect order. But there was something odd about her too. Patrons often found her talking softly to herself between the aisles, her lips moving like she was answering invisible questions. When asked, she'd simply smile and say, "They get lonely at night." No one knew what she meant. It wasn't until the winter of 1921 that things took a chilling turn. One stormy night, Margaret stayed late to finish cataloging a new collection of rare books donated by a local historian. The next morning, the janitor found her dead at her desk, her face pale as parchment, eyes wide open, staring at a wall lined with antique encyclopedias. On the desk, the lamp was still burning, and beside her hand lay a book that no one remembered being part of the donation, a black leather volume with no title, no author, and no publisher. Inside, every page was blank except the first one, where someone had written in faint, trembling ink, "Keep them quiet." The book disappeared soon after her death, and no one ever claimed to have seen it again. The town mourned Margaret briefly, then moved on, but the library never felt the same. Staff began complaining about strange sounds after dark, whispers that seemed to come from the stacks even when no one was there. Books fell from shelves on their own, and faint footsteps echoed in the reading room long after closing. Some librarians swore they heard Margaret's heels clicking softly on the floor, pacing the aisles like she used to. But the whispers were the worst. One evening in the 1950s, a young librarian named Carol stayed late to reorganize the history section. She claimed she heard 2 voices murmuring in the far corner, one female, one male, arguing about something. When she went to check, the aisle was empty. Still, the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder until she could make out words, but not quite sentences, like fragmented thoughts escaping from another world. Carol quit the next morning, refusing to ever step foot inside again. Over the years, the library tried to modernize, new lighting, fresh paint, digital catalogs, but nothing changed the atmosphere. No matter how bright the bulbs, the corners always seemed too dark. Security guards reported flickering lights on the 3rd floor, doors that opened and closed on their own, and cold drafts that felt like someone brushing past them. The local police even responded to motion alarms several times, only to find no one there. Then came the night of 1987, when 2 college students broke in on a dare. They wanted to record the whispers everyone talked about. Armed with a camcorder and flashlights, they explored the library past midnight, laughing and joking, until the laughter stopped. On the footage later recovered by police, their voices turned uneasy. "Did you hear that?" one whispers. Then a faint voice answers, not theirs, soft, close, and almost pleading. "Quiet. Please." After that, the camera shakes violently, crashes to the floor, and cuts off. The boys were found hours later, unconscious but alive, both with identical scratches down their arms as if clawed by paper edges. When they woke, they refused to talk about what happened except to say one thing: "She's still there." Ever since, the Salem Public Library has been the subject of quiet local fear. Some claim Margaret Hayes never left. her soul bound to the shelves she loved so much. Others believe the whispers come from the books themselves, feeding off her energy. In 2003, a night janitor named Luis reported hearing a woman humming an old tune near the basement archives. He followed the sound until it faded into silence, only to find a single open book lying on the floor, a ledger of late fees from 1912. On its last page, scrolled in handwriting identical to Margaret's, were the words, "They're louder now." The city briefly closed the library for maintenance, though insiders say it was an attempt to investigate the paranormal activity discreetly. Experts came with recording devices, EMF meters, and thermal cameras. Nothing conclusive was found, but every recording captured faint whisper-like static, always between the shelves where Margaret once worked. Some believed it was interference. Others weren't so sure. Even today, the staff avoid staying alone after dusk. Visitors who linger too long claim to feel watched, as if unseen eyes follow them through the aisles. Some say the whispering grows clear if you stand still and listen hard enough, sometimes sounding like laughter, sometimes like names being called, and sometimes like someone reciting book titles that no longer exist. One night in 2019, a librarian named Hannah was closing up when she noticed a shadow standing at the end of an aisle. It looked like a woman in an old-fashioned dress, her hair pinned up neatly. Thinking it was a visitor who hadn't left, Hannah called out, "Ma'am, we're closed." The shadow didn't move. When Hannah approached, the lights flickered and the shadow vanished. She later found an old photograph in the archives, a portrait of the staff from 1913. Among them stood Margaret Hayes, wearing the same dress Hannah described. That was enough for her. She resigned the next week. Now even the bravest workers admit there's something strange about the library. The air changes after sunset. The silence isn't empty, it breathes. Sometimes a book will slide out from its place as if nudged by invisible fingers, landing open to a random page. Sometimes if you listen between the soft creaks of the building, you might hear that same whisper, "Quiet, please," echoing faintly through the shelves. No one knows what those whispers want or what they're trying to say. Some think Margaret's spirit is still protecting the library, making sure it stays peaceful and orderly. Others believe something darker took root there that night in 1921, something that used her devotion as a doorway. Whatever it is, people in Salem have learned to respect the library after dark. They speak of it in hushed tones, the way you'd talk about a place that watches you back. And if you ever find yourself walking past it on a foggy night, you might catch a glimpse through the tall arched windows, rows of books resting in perfect stillness, and perhaps just for a second, the faint outline of a woman standing among them, her finger pressed to her lips, whispering the same warning that's been carried through the decades. Keep them quiet. 2. The Librarian Who Never Left. The haunting of Chicago's Old Town branch, in the heart of Chicago's Old Town, tucked between coffee shops and crumbling brownstones, stands a modest red brick building that most people walk past without a second glance. The Old Town branch. Library doesn't look like much, just another century-old structure from the early 1900s. But those who've stepped inside after dark will tell you there's something off about it. The air feels thicker there, heavier somehow, as if the walls are still holding on to memories they can't let go of. The library was built in 1906. During the city's rapid rebuilding years, and from the beginning, it had a reputation for being different. Locals whispered that strange things happened even during its construction. Tools disappearing, bricks rearranging overnight, and workers hearing faint murmurs in the unfinished basement. But it wasn't until a certain librarian named Eleanor Finch arrived in 1934 that the real horror began to unfold. Eleanor was quiet, meticulous, and almost unnervingly polite. She lived alone in a tiny apartment just 2 blocks away, and spent nearly every waking hour in the library. To her, books weren't just her job. They were her family, her world, her only comfort in a city that never really cared for loners. Her co-workers joked that she'd probably die in the library one day. They had no idea how right they'd be. During the harsh winter of 1941, Chicago was buried under snow. One evening, Eleanor stayed late to finish shelving a new shipment of books, insisting she'd lock up afterward. But when the morning staff arrived, the doors were still locked from the inside. They had to break a window to get in. What they found chilled their blood. Eleanor was sitting upright at one of the reading tables, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes open but lifeless. The coroner said it was a heart attack, but those who saw her claimed her expression wasn't peaceful. It was terrified, as if she'd seen something unimaginable in her final moments. Beside her, one of the old floor lamps was still on, flickering weakly, and several books were scattered on the floor, all opened to the same page, a passage about the dead who linger among the living. Her funeral was small. A few co-workers attended, some patrons brought flowers, and the library closed for 2 days out of respect. But when it reopened, things began to change. Books went missing, only to reappear in strange places. A history book found in the children's section, a Bible lying open on the floor, its pages wet as though someone had cried over it. Lights flickered without cause, and the scent of Eleanor's favorite perfume, lavender and paper, hung in the air even years after her death. The night janitor was the first to hear her. He'd mop the marble floors and hear faint footsteps following behind him, the soft tap of sensible shoes echoing in the quiet. Once he swore he saw a reflection in the glass door, a woman with neatly pinned hair and round glasses, standing right behind him, though the hallway was empty when he turned around. He quit the next morning, refusing to even collect his last paycheck. As decades passed, the haunting grew bolder. In the 1960s, a librarian named Martin reported hearing someone whisper his name while he was sorting books in the archives. He thought it was a co-worker until he realized he was completely alone. Later that night, he found an old checkout card on his desk. The name on it? Eleanor Finch. The date stamped beside it was the very day she died. Martin left the card where it was, but the next morning it was gone. Another worker, a young woman named Teresa, claimed that late one evening as she was closing up, she heard a voice behind her say, "Don't forget to turn the lights off, dear." She turned, startled. But there was no one there, only the faint smell of lavender drifting through the air. After that, she made sure never to stay past dusk again. People started calling her the librarian who never left. Even those who didn't believe in ghosts avoided the place after sunset. Teenagers dared each other to peek through the library windows at night, and some swore they saw a figure moving between the shelves, always in the same gray cardigan Eleanor was known for wearing. One boy claimed she waved at him. Another said she shushed him with a finger to her lips. These stories might have stayed just urban legends if not for the incident in 1982. A storm knocked out the power one night while 2 staff members, Kevin and Laura, were inside closing. They decided to wait it out, using flashlights to check the basement for leaks. Down there, in the flickering beam of light, they saw her, a woman standing at the far end of the aisle, motionless, her head slightly tilted as though she were listening. Kevin called out, thinking it might be a lost patron, but the woman didn't move. When Laura raised her flashlight, the light passed right through her. Eleanor's face pale and distant, her eyes reflecting nothing. She vanished before their eyes. Kevin left town soon after, and Laura refused to speak about that night until years later, when she described the cold that filled the room and the faint whisper she heard just before the apparition disappeared. "Please don't leave me alone again." By the late 1990s, even skeptics started admitting something was wrong with the Old Town branch. Security cameras picked up shadows moving when the building was empty. Motion sensors triggered alarms without cause. Every night at precisely 8:14 p.m., the time Eleanor was believed to have died, one of the old lamps in the reading room would flicker on for a few seconds, even when unplugged. Electricians checked the wiring countless times, but nothing was ever found. A local paranormal investigator group spent the night inside in 2005. Recording hours of audio and video, they reported hearing pages turning, footsteps circling them, and the unmistakable sound of someone whispering, "Hush." Their equipment recorded a voice, soft, female, and pleading, saying, "Stay." They left before dawn, visibly shaken. The city, embarrassed by the growing rumors, tried to downplay it all as myths. But even city officials admitted strange maintenance requests kept coming in. Lights burning out in the same spot over and over. Computers turning on by themselves, and books constantly being found on Eleanor's old favorite table. The cleaning staff said they'd find fresh footprints in the dust each morning, though no one had walked there for hours. In 2012, a renovation crew was brought in to restore the old basement, and that's when they uncovered something truly disturbing. Behind one of the old brick walls, they found a narrow crawl space sealed off decades ago. Inside was a small wooden chair, a stack of mildewed books, and a single candle melted down to the base. On the wall, Scratched into the bricks were the words, "Still cataloging." The handwriting matched Eleanor's. The area was sealed again, but the workers never stopped talking about it. Some said they felt like they were being watched the entire time. Others refused to go back down after tools began disappearing and reappearing in different rooms. The foreman quit halfway through the job saying, "Whatever's down there doesn't want us to finish." To this day, librarians at Old Town Branch talk about Eleanor as though she's still one of them. They'll leave a chair open at her old desk during staff meetings, a quiet gesture of respect or maybe superstition. Some swear it creaks softly, as though someone invisible just sat down. Visitors sometimes notice their books being checked out even when they haven't reached the counter yet, as if unseen hands are still helping. A few children have asked their parents who the nice lady in glasses was that helped them find a book when no staff member fit that description. And late at night, if you walk past the tall windows, you might catch a faint silhouette moving through the aisles, orderly, graceful, and forever making sure everything's in its right place. Locals say Eleanor's still doing what she loved most, keeping the library in perfect order even in death. Others think she's trapped there, unable to leave the only home she ever knew. Either way, if you ever find yourself in Chicago's Old Town after dark and you hear the soft shuffle of footsteps behind you when the library's closed, don't look back. Just keep walking, because those who've dared to turn around say they've seen her standing there, in the glow of the old reading lamp, eyes full of sadness, whispering the same words she's been repeating for over 80 years. Shh, people are still reading. The Cursed Book of New Orleans Public Archives. In the heart of New Orleans, where the air hums with jazz and mystery, stands a building most tourists walk past without noticing, the New Orleans Public Archives, a tall, time-worn structure built in 1898. By day, it's a peaceful haven for historians, researchers, and curious students flipping through old maps and handwritten letters. But when the sun goes down and the last librarian locks the grand oak doors, something stirs among the stacks. Locals whisper about a book that doesn't belong there, a book that refuses to stay shelved, a book they call the Cursed Volume. The story begins in 1927 when the archives received a large donation from a private estate belonging to a man named Dr. Benjamin Armitage, a reclusive historian known for his fascination with voodoo practices and Louisiana folklore. Among the crates of manuscripts and journals, one stood out. A large leather-bound book wrapped tightly in burlap and sealed with black wax. The label simply read, "Do not open." Naturally, the archivists opened it. Inside were brittle pages filled with symbols and incantations written in French, Latin, and an unrecognizable dialect that made even the most educated among them uneasy. There were strange illustrations, figures with hollow eyes, serpents coiled around candles, and shadowy shapes hovering over what looked like the French Quarter. Nobody could trace its origin. The earliest entries dated back to the late 1700s during the height of colonial New Orleans, but there was no author, no title, no explanation. The director of the archives, a pragmatic man named Charles DuPont, dismissed it as superstition and placed it in the rare collection room. That's when the trouble began. Within weeks, staff started reporting odd occurrences. The temperature in the rare collection room dropped noticeably, even during the sweltering Louisiana summer. Lights flickered. Books fell off shelves without explanation. One night, a security guard swore he heard whispering from the locked room, voices speaking in a language he couldn't understand. When he opened the door, the whispers stopped and the cursed book lay open on the floor, though no one had touched it. The next morning, he quit on the spot, muttering about eyes in the dark. DuPont brushed it off as paranoia until he himself experienced something he couldn't explain. Late one evening, as he reviewed some documents alone, he heard pages turning behind him. Thinking someone had entered, he turned around, only to find the cursed book open on the table, though he was certain he'd left it locked in a glass case hours earlier. The air smelled faintly of smoke and iron. The words on the page seemed to shift before his eyes, the ink darkening like fresh blood. He slammed it shut, locked it away again, and ordered it to be stored in the basement vault. That should have been the end of it. But whatever was bound to that book didn't like being buried. Strange accidents followed. A researcher named Helen was found unconscious one morning near the vault, mumbling incoherently about the woman with no face. Another employee, Tom, disappeared altogether, His keys and glasses were found near the basement stairs, but no trace of him was ever discovered. Police searched the entire building and even the sewers beneath, but he was gone. Some said he'd been taken. Others whispered that the book had claimed him. Over the years, rumors spread among archivists. The cursed book had a will of its own. It moved when no one was watching, appearing on desks, opening to random pages. Those who dared to read it claimed they heard whispers behind them, or saw fleeting figures in the corners of their eyes. A few even said the book could show you things, visions of fire, screams, and endless corridors of shadow. Most dismissed it as folklore, but the stories persisted, passed quietly from one generation of workers to the next, like a dark secret no one wanted to inherit. In 1954, a fire broke out in the archives under mysterious circumstances. It started, according to witnesses, in the basement vault, right where the cursed book was kept. The flames spread fast, but strangely only the vault remained untouched. When firefighters finally pried open the door, every single item inside had turned to ash, except that one book, lying in the center of the floor, its cover unscathed, its wax seal cracked open. From then on, the archives developed a reputation. Visitors claimed to feel watched, even followed, as if unseen eyes peered from the shadows. Night guards reported cold spots in the hallways, and faint humming drifting through the building. Sometimes the sound of turning pages echoed in empty rooms. The staff grew superstitious. They began leaving offerings near the old glass case, small crosses, rosaries, even coins, believing it might keep the curse at bay. But the book seemed to feed on attention. In 1972, a graduate student named Robert Landry came across a mention of it while researching local occultism. Fascinated, he requested special access to the archives. Despite warnings, he convinced the staff to let him study it for one night. The next morning, the reading room was found in disarray, papers scattered, tables overturned, and Robert gone. Only his recorder remained, its tape still spinning. On it were fragments of his voice, nervous at first, then panicked.
There's something moving, the words, they're changing, they know my name.
Then silence, followed by faint laughter. A woman's voice whispering in French, and finally the sound of heavy breathing before the tape cut off. The police never found him. The case was quietly closed as a disappearance. The archives shut down for 2 months after that. Even decades later, the stories never stopped. In 1999, a new curator named Emily Torres took over the archives. Rational, science-minded, and skeptical of anything supernatural, she dismissed the legends as old nonsense. When she finally saw the cursed book herself, though, she admitted it made her uneasy. The leather looked alive. She described it as warm to the touch, like skin under sunlight. One night, curiosity got the better of her. She stayed after hours, determined to read the entire thing and prove once and for all that it was harmless. The next morning, the janitor found her at her desk, slumped forward, her eyes wide open and glassy, her skin pale as bone. The book lay beside her, open to a page that hadn't existed before, one written entirely in English. The words read, "She shouldn't have looked." After that, the city officials decided to seal the archive's basement permanently. But still, reports kept coming. Visitors saw a woman wandering the aisles late at night, her head bent as though reading, her skin translucent in the dim light. Some believed it was Emily's spirit. Others thought it was something much older, the true owner of the book. Maintenance workers complained of whispers in the ventilation shafts, like someone whispering prayers or curses through the walls. Once, a group of tourists visiting during a Halloween event claimed to see a black mist rise from the cracks in the basement floor, curling like smoke before vanishing into thin air. The power went out minutes later, and the event was canceled for good. By the 2010s, the cursed book had become local legend. Paranormal investigators begged for permission to see it, but the city refused. Rumor has it the book is still down there, buried behind layers of concrete and steel, sealed in an old box labeled restricted. But even that hasn't stopped its presence. The archive's employees say every few years, a new incident happens, books turning to blank pages overnight, the scent of burning wax drifting through the halls, strange messages appearing on computer screens that simply read, "Open me." Some nights, motion sensors pick up figures moving in the restricted section, though the cameras show nothing but darkness. A few staff members have quietly transferred to other branches, unable to take the constant sense of dread that seeps into their dreams. They say they can still hear the whispers long after they leave, as if the book followed them home. One former archivist, interviewed anonymously in 2021, confessed that before he left, he sneaked a peek at the sealed room through a ventilation grate. What he saw terrified him. In the middle of the dark chamber was the book, glowing faintly as though lit from within. Its pages fluttered even though there was no wind. He swore he heard voices coming from it, hundreds of them all whispering the same words in a mixture of English, French, and something else entirely. When asked what they said, he hesitated before replying, "They were begging." Every single one was begging to be let out. Today, the New Orleans Public Archive still stands, open to the public by day but closed promptly at 6 each evening. Few people stay behind after sunset, and even fewer dare to go near the old vault door that remains sealed shut. The staff avoids talking about the cursed book altogether. They say it's safer that way, that speaking its name draws its attention. Sometimes late at night, when the streets outside are quiet and the Mississippi wind howls through the alleys, locals claim they can hear the faint sound of pages turning from inside the building, followed by a whisper that seems to slip right through the cracks in the walls. "Open me." Some say it's just the wind. Others swear it's the cursed book, still waiting for someone foolish enough to set it free. And if you ever find yourself in New Orleans walking past that old archive after dark, you might catch a glimpse of something flickering behind the window, like candlelight on a desk that no one sits at anymore, or the faint outline of a woman leaning over an open book, smiling as if she's been expecting you.